This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, I did a check 1, 2 before we started, just to make sure the audio for the intro didn't glitch out this time. If you watch the Friday show, you know what I'm referring to. But welcome one and all to another Monday installment of the Five Starr Wrestling Report. We are here each Monday and Friday for new content and new reviews. It is WrestleMania season, and boy is the thrill level at an all-time low. God, this week's SmackDown was the perfect model for why that's the case. No energy, no life. Just an absolute bore fest of a TV program. And that was just me watching the show at 50%. Because I skipped through a bunch of filler this week. Show was like an hour and 8 minutes in overall runtime. Discount commercials. I think I watched maybe 35 minutes out of the whole show. But before we dive into all that, we also have the classic Retro Raw and Retro NXT shows to get through. Raw shouldn't take all that long, as you'll see in a few seconds here. Had it not been for the main event, I'd probably just skipped over the entire review. Before we get into everything, though, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or Rumble, make sure you come back to support the show every week if you can. Have the bell icon turned on so you're notified when our shows go up. And if for whatever reason you're still not being notified, I can blame YouTube for that. That's all I can say. But let's get going with things here. This is our go-home Raw before WrestleMania 11, which basically means that the majority of the program was one giant infomercial. And again, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time recounting each promotional package, but they basically had a split screen going on throughout the program, where Vince and Todd Pettingill were in the studio covering the WrestleMania card, basically sharing their 2 cents on each of the individual programs. It was about as painful as you'd imagine. And then JR and Gorilla Monsoon were actually at the venue in whatever town it was in California they were at. Stockton? No clue. But that was basically what they had going on throughout the night. Sort of a back and forth pitch between all the major TV segments. The first feud Vince and Todd covered was the Diesel-Shawn title match. Arguably the one program that's probably gotten the least amount of attention on TV. But they sort of went through the timeline and brought us up to speed with all the big angles between Survivor Series 94 and where we are now. Shawn is now sporting his gruffly 5 o'clock shadow look. He'd been growing it out for a bit, but now it's less patchy. It's actually grown in now. And he's a heel, so it kind of makes sense. The only takeaway I got from the interaction between him and Diesel was when Shawn said that he would go over at WrestleMania. And then Diesel said, "Over my dead body." But, I guess we just needed a wink and nod at the camera a little bit for all the marks, just to let everybody know whose side Shawn was on. But that was really it. And we'll talk about the match next week when we review the card. Then they swept that under the rug and brought more attention to the Bam Bam Bigelow-Lawrence Taylor feud, as if it needed more attention. I mean, if they spent 3 minutes covering the Shawn Diesel match, this probably went for twice that length. And it's pretty much every bullet point we've already covered about the Bam Bam LT feud. I mean, my running joke with the whole thing was if you already couldn't tell which was main eventing the card, and you had blinders on. I mean, last week they basically ransacked the entire NFL locker room and paid a bunch of guys to show up and share their insight on the match. That was where we saw Mongo McMichael do commentary with Vince. And they shot the fight with him and Kama at ringside. It was like 1,000 times better and more heated than the Bam Bam LT feud. But again, it's all just promotional tactic to sell the match. You know, the goal with these studio settings is to try to make everything look insider baseball with how the commentators are talking up the feuds, showing clips, reliving the timeline. I think the issue this ran into is that when your two studio voices are Vince McMahon and Todd Pettingill, it's not really giving you much to work with in terms of riveting back and forth banter. And then after a handful of in-studio plugs, we eventually got this JR Bob Backlund pre-taped interview. Of course, right out of the gate, JR fucks up by now referring to him as Mr. Bob Backlund. So Jim got ran up the flagpole for that. And then Backlund assured us that he was going to open a cascade of chemical reaction when he and Bret step into the ring at WrestleMania for their I Quit match. I personally thought Backlund would have been much fonder of Dawn products. But hey, Cascade is always a good alternative. And to cap it off, while Backlund is continuing his tirade, JR pulls the mic away and immediately pitches back to Vince and Todd. All the while, Backlund is still screaming into the camera while his face is turning beet red. That man had no filter. A true legend. Don't ever forget that. And it is Mr. Bob Backlund, all you peons out there. And they kind of tied all this hand in hand with the Razor Ramon Double J IC title promo. Razor had interfered in Backlund's match with Jarrett on the recent Saturday Morning Slam, which cost him the belt. So Backlund returned the favor by putting Razor in the chicken wing, while Double J and the Roadie stomped a mud hole in him. I mean, in essence, I don't think Backlund was entirely out of line for doing so. Despite Razor being a babyface and Backlund being a heel, I mean, I'd have kicked Razor's ass if he just screwed me out of my chance at winning the IC title. So, well, then Vince called Todd a butthead. That was the thing that happened on the show. Somehow they were able to smoothly transition from that talking point into a quick conversation about King Kong Bundy and The Undertaker. I guess because Bundy's head resembled a butt. Yeah, Vince would know all too well about butts, wouldn't he? Too soon. Well, anyway. Enough of this foreplay. We're here to talk about one thing on this week's Raw. It had absolutely nothing to do with WrestleMania. It was about dealing with an unsettled score dating back to last year's WrestleMania. It is the no-holds-barred showdown between Bret and Owen. We've now seen both men score one victory over the other. Now it is the rubber match, so to speak. The blow-off that no one remembers, which is kind of the unfortunate reputation this match gets. People remember the WrestleMania match. They remember the cage match at SummerSlam. You really don't hear too many people recount that classic no-holds-barred match from the March 27th edition of Monday Night Raw from 1995. Probably for good reason. I think it's safe to say that things have massively cooled off with this program since last summer. Let me figures. After barely addressing the issue for the past 6, almost 7 months, it's going to be hard to retain that same level of intrigue that the feud had last year when Owen was at peak heel performance. I mean, he actually had to remind me here a few times that he was still the King of Hearts. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, Owen did win King of the Ring last year, didn't he? Forgot all about that. So yeah, this was in fact the final match in the series. Still a great match, per Owen and Bret standards. I mean, in general, the whole thing was like, what, 10 minutes? I guess if you include commercial, a little over that. And for something that was deemed no holds barred, it was certainly nothing outrageously brutal. Not that I was expecting a bloodbath, because, I mean, this is WWF circa the mid-90s we're talking about. Blood, gore, and violence were very much off limits. I mean, if y'all remember back last year, didn't Jerry Lawler get in hot water for throwing a garbage can at Duke the Dumpster on TV? The network got all up in arms about it for weeks. That is the level of squaredom that went into WWF programming around this time. It was very plain and very safe. So the extent of no holds barred here pretty much amounted to no count out. A little bit more floor brawling than we were accustomed to seeing. No weapons, no heavy angles. Nothing that really gave you the indication it was anything other than a standard quality TV match. So I'd kind of argue it wasn't really a fitting payoff to the feud, all things considered. I mean, the action was great. Owen and Bret have never had a bad match together. But it was all mainly focused around the big moves and the drama of the near falls, I guess. Still had plenty of heat. I mean, Owen knew how to get heat from the crowd just by looking in their general direction. And they picked up the intensity as it went. But man, even the finishes seemed very anticlimactic. After Owen runs Bret into the corner, he tries to go up and hit him with a missile drop kick. But Bret picks the ankles, sets him up for a sharpshooter, and then Owen taps almost immediately. And then Bret keeps the hold on him for about another minute before finally breaking it. Yeah, but the whole thing was like, bam, bam, sharpshooter, done. They didn't milk the submission hold. It was like Bret slapped it on, and Owen wasted no time tapping out. It's just a very weird match to review, because in a vacuum, if you remove the fact that this was supposed to be a blow-off to a year-long rivalry, it was a very technically sound TV main event. Crowd enjoyed it. But nothing about the nature of it seemed like a grudge match or a blow-off match. That's probably why people don't really remember this third match in the Owen Bret series all that well. They remember the two pay-per-view matches from '94. This one kind of gets lost in the sauce. And, you know, maybe that's just because of the placement of it. You know, the fact that Bret already had like 4 other feuds going on at the time. I think the Owen feud just kind of fizzled out very abruptly. You know, all of a sudden, 6 days out from now, Bret's getting set for an I Quit match with Bob Backlund. Owen ends up getting involved in the tag title hunt with Yokozuna, which I think they end up billing as a mystery partner type story. I mean, there was no build up to that at all. I mean, I keep talking about the fact that '95 was a rough year for the WWF. It's moments like this where you reflect back on and you think, maybe a missed opportunity? Could have made history by doing Owen and Bret in the I Quit match at WrestleMania. 1 year in the making. The ultimate feud settler. Why not? It was on the table. Instead, they went with Backlund. And it just didn't have the same level of heat to it. But so much of that Mania card was like this looking back. And even when we go to review the show next week, you'll see why a lot of people often refer to this as one of the worst Mania pay-per-views of all time. as bad as 9 was, I know people often shit on that show for being an outright horror fest. And there were a lot of things wrong with it overall. I'm not denying it. But at least we remember a few things from WrestleMania 9. We can at least look back and laugh at it. I don't even think WrestleMania 11 had redeeming qualities of bad. It was just unredeemable crap. But we will open that can of worms next weekend. It'll probably be the last time I ever think about WrestleMania 11 ever again. But it sure set a precedent. Set a precedent for the remainder of the year. And the sheer horrors we were yet in store for. But for now, let's talk about SmackDown. Is it sad that I just watched the show on Saturday afternoon? 24 hours later, I don't remember a damn thing about it. Well, I guess it's not entirely true. I remember the stuff with Roman and Cody. The rest of the show, not so much. Not that any of it mattered. It started to become the main tagline for WrestleMania 40. Roman versus Cody, Part 2. And everything else. I'm still not even convinced that I'm going to watch SmackDown after WrestleMania. There's just nothing on the show worth talking about most weeks. At least not in any long-form detail. I even looked at the opener this week as a prime example of that. For whatever reason, they decided that instead of saving Rey Mysterio versus Santos Escobar for WrestleMania, they'd rather just do the match for free on TV like 2 weeks beforehand. Why? I don't fucking know. It's not like they're battling for time constraints with the show. They got 2 nights. Apparently someone said, yeah, I don't know, dude. We might not have room for this one. So let's just put it on TV. That way we'll be able to save room for, I don't know, I guess more talking. Disappointing too. Because outside that one slip up early on where Rey looked like he tweaked his knee, I thought these guys were really cooking by the end. I did sort of laugh at the miscue spot where Rey had his hands locked around Escobar. He was going up for that little tornado hurricane rana thing he normally does. But I think Escobar was supposed to cut him off. So there's a really awkward 3 seconds where Rey and Santos are kind of looking at each other on the apron. And you can audibly hear somebody in the crowd go, "What are you doing?" That was, I don't think I was supposed to laugh. But it was humorous. But once they found their footing, they actually put together a really decent match. It's a shame they couldn't have waited a couple more weeks to just put it on the Mania card in front of a packed house. I wasn't a fan of them going to the heat spot during the commercial and then coming back to show it on replay. That was kind of dumb. Considering how the whole feud started months back, with Escobar kicking Mysterio's leg in between the ring post and the outside steps, why would you air that as a replay coming back from commercial? Shouldn't that be the standard commercial pitch spot? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Escobar may have destroyed Mysterio's knee again. Stay tuned. Don't go away. We'll find out if he can recover when we come back. Instead it was, oh yeah, here's what you missed during the break. Escobar shattered Mysterio's knee again. Nothing all too exciting. I'll even go on record by saying I thought Rey looked better than Escobar throughout a lot of this match. Maybe that was a reflection of Escobar being a little timid and trying to be extra careful, but I mean, Rey was on fire for a lot of this. Crowd was really into everything they were doing. The one spot on the floor right before the lead up to the finish, that West Coast pop over the barricade to the floor. God, that looked gnarly. I mean, I'm always scared Rey's going to blow out his knees doing shit like that. I wish he'd tone down the high-risk stuff. But let's be honest. This was all about the finish. And it was a pretty great heat finish, I have to admit. When Rey tried to set up Escobar for the springboard splash, and then Dirty Dom showed up with the Rey mask and cut him off, that was awesome. And like, the best part is that nobody saw that coming. I mean, they haven't even remotely touched the Rey-Dom feud since, I guess it would have been last year's WrestleMania, right? And I remember that being a really solid match. But when Rey went over clean, I kind of assumed that was the end of it. But now we see Dom showing up here and costing Rey a match. I mean, he's been sidetracked with all the Judgment Day stuff on Raw. I thought it was really well done if they were going for that whole shock factor. And the crowd booed the shit out of Dom the moment the mask came off. I mean, I guess in hindsight, if you wanted to nitpick the booking of the angle, you could ask, okay, so why did Dom come out with a mask on if he was just going to take it off 3 seconds later to reveal himself? Because pro wrestling logic. But Escobar took advantage and beat Rey with the Phantom Driver. And then he and Dom left together, so is he an honorary member of Legado del Fantasma? Who knows? I could maybe see them doing some kind of tag match with maybe Escobar and Dom versus Rey and Carlito. That would at least make some rational sense if they were going to continue the story forward. So by that sense, I'm good with what they did. I just kind of wish they would have saved the initial Rey Santos match for Mania, since it's kind of what it all seemed like it was leading to. I guess throwing Dom in there gives it a little more edge. You know, Escobar's not really going to generate the same kind of heat that Dirty Dom is going to. And since there's already bad blood between Rey and Dom from what happened last year, you know, they can at least milk that for future matches. So, I mean, we'll see. I like the segment. Good start to the show. I mean, out of everything that happened in this segment, the only thing I mainly remembered offhand was the Dom interference at the very end. But I thought Rey looked good. I mean, his knees are completely shot, but the rest of his body's still holding up pretty well. And considering all the surgeries and everything that guy's been through over the last how many years, he's a freak of nature, dude. What more can I say? So after that, we had one of those tag team qualifier dilly bobs to see which poor saps are going to get thrust into that stupid 6-way ladder match. I already did my 5-minute tangent last week on how stupid I think the whole thing is. I'm not going to go into that again. Here they did Austin Theory and Grayson Fodder versus the Bald Egg Jobbers, which Fodder and Theory predictably won. And that should really tell you something about Anderson and Gallows at this point. Especially when you consider how rarely we see Theory and Fodder win matches in WWE. Even those guys are fully capable of beating the Bald Egg Jabronis. So that kind of tells you what creative thinks of them. Anyway, I didn't watch this. Why bother? I already knew who was going over. And watching Anderson and Gallows work, I got more enjoyment out of clipping my toenails on the couch. Not watching an Anderson Gallows match. You kidding me? I got standards, bro. I also didn't really pay attention to Naomi versus Io Sky because, well, you know. So after Io won, the heels beat up on Naomi and Bianca Belair some more. People were chanting for Bayley the whole time, but she didn't come out because I guess her and Bianca were arguing about something earlier in the show. Must have been a segment I missed because I don't recall it. I do remember Bianca doing some kind of skit the other week where she was mentioning something about Bayley, saying she got what was coming to her after all the horrible shit she's done with Damage Control for the past 3 years. So, maybe Bianca's going heel soon. Can't really argue against it if I'm being honest. I mean, I've been over babyface Bianca Belair for years now. I always thought she was much better suited as a heel. But maybe that's something they're exploring for a later date. We'll see. So, well, then a bunch of other shit happened between this match and the next one. Something where Naomi was getting her eyes flushed out with water. I guess because Asuka spat food coloring at her. There was something involving Pretty Dreadly, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton in the bag that was just... no. Just no. There was also a random clip they aired with cops arresting criminals in the dark. I have no idea what that show was being sponsored for. All I remember is that they went immediately from that to playing the Street Profits theme music. So all the BLM activists out there will probably get their panties in a bunch. Going, oh my God, it's a sign. WWE's racist. They did that on purpose. I mean, just the simple fact that I'm bringing that up shows how fucked up our culture is. So, yeah, the Prophets wrestled the Authors of Pain. And after winning approximately one squash on TV from what I remember, the guys literally just re-signed with the company not too long ago. The AOP is now doing clean jobs to mid-card tag teams in the middle of SmackDown via roll-up. Wow. Was it worth it, guys? Was it really worth re-signing after all that time off? This is what your careers are now reduced to. But hey, I guess they lucked out. Because they won't have to participate in that six-way ladder clusterfuck. They are likely going to miss a WrestleMania payout because of it, but honestly, does it even matter at this point? But just like that, we are ready to talk about the main event segment. Getting all that bothersome wrestling talk out of the way. No one gives a fuck about any of that. What we really came to see this week was some talking. Some good old-fashioned gotcha promo battles. It is the face-off between Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns ahead of their title match in 2 weeks. We've had a lot of stuff involving The Rock. A lot of stuff involving Seth Rollins. Yeah, but in terms of the actual Night 2 showdown with Roman and Cody, kind of where this all started about a year ago, and we haven't really seen a lot of face-to-face interaction between just those two without the involvement of other parties. I mean, and Roman even stated from the onset here, I'm all alone, no family, no backup, no bloodline. Discount the wise man. It's just me and you, Cody. Chance for Roman to speak his mind about what he thinks of Cody Rhodes. And he basically just outright says, you're stupid to me. I think you're an idiot. He says that Cody's dumb enough to trust a guy like Seth Rollins to watch his back when he's one of the most conniving snakes to ever step foot in a ring. Roman's felt the brunt of that when Seth turned on the Shield years ago. The guy's only out for himself, yet Cody thinks he can trust him. That's stupid. But then, of course, Cody turns it back on Roman and says, well, okay, fine. Maybe Seth does hate my guts. But I guarantee you he hates your guts a lot more, Roman. Then he turns the conversation on its face and asks Roman if he can trust The Rock. There's a huge battle for supremacy in the family lineage right now. The tribal chief versus the final boss. Does Rock really have Roman's best interest at heart? Or is there an ulterior motive? And they sort of went back and forth with Roman calling Cody number 2. The fact that he'll always be number 2 and nothing will ever change. And then Cody tries to retort by telling Roman that come Mania, he won't be number 2. He'll be the one. The one to beat Roman for the Universal title and take down the bloodline for good. And right as Roman and Heyman are about to leave, that's when Solo and Jimmy file out from the crowd to, well, at first, I thought they were going to try to jump Cody, but then they just kind of circled the barricade and walked toward the aisleway so Jey Uso and Seth Rollins could show up from the other side and do the big 6-way standoff. It was very weird. I figure Roman was lying when he said he came alone. We all know how the bloodline works. But just the fact that the heels basically walked past Cody and didn't even try to attack him. They just sauntered by and stared at him. Kind of underwhelming. And overall, I honestly think that's a perfect summation of everything that went down here. The back and forth exchange with Cody and Roman just seemed very underwhelming, very flat. The entire time I'm listening to the crowd react to this, there just seemed to be a lot of dead silence, a lot of awkward moments where I think they were waiting for the crowd to respond to stuff, but it just never happened. I don't think Roman did particularly well here on the mic. He seemed very out of sorts. Almost like he was thrown off by the awkward silences. Cody was his normal self. He did fine. But there was no spark. Without The Rock's involvement, I think the reality kind of set in here for a lot of people that he's overshadowed a lot of the initial title program. The Roman-Cody Night 2 match is almost starting to come off like an afterthought. The draw right now is the tag match on Night 1. But the actual title bout, people just don't seem all that invested right now. I think the other problem is that there's really nothing that they've said or did here that hasn't already been stated on TV. And it really wasn't about Roman and Cody at the end of the day. Because they were spending a lot of time focusing on Seth, focusing on The Rock. But in terms of bringing everything full circle back to the initial beef between Roman and Cody, nothing was really addressed. There was nothing here that gave people the indication that this is still a blood feud dating back to last year. That unresolved tension. Roman talked a little bit about Cody's empty promises and the fact that he's a walking politician. But what did they really do here to milk the drama of Cody needing to finish the story? To fulfill the dream of winning the title for his daddy that they stole from him in the garden? Where was all that? Now it was just more of the same when it came to building promotion and building anticipation for the Night 1 tag match. So I really think this fell short of the mark. It was missing the appropriate detail. Like the one opportunity they had where they could actually keep the focus on Roman and Cody independently. They still made it about the tag match. So I really don't know what to say about it. Was it good? Was it bad? I think that's all kind of subjective. But was it effective? That I would argue against. Now, they still have a couple more weeks to drum up some excitement for that Roman-Cody title match. But they're going to need to hit the ground running if they want to make that as white-hot as the Rock Roman versus Cody Seth tag match. Because right now, that's the match that people are talking about more. That's the big money attraction, so to speak. But I think it should be the other way around, regardless of whether or not Rock is involved. Now, of course, we're not going to review the go-home show. I mean, I'll watch next week to see how they wrap up all this. But that'll basically be the final SmackDown before Mania. And in terms of the rest of the show this week, outside those two key segments I just recapped, I mean, it was SmackDown. A lot of stuff in the middle that just kind of existed. Gave me no reason to care about any further story implication. And we're still in that trap right now with the Bloodline story where you have a championship rematch a year in the making that still kind of feels like second fiddle to a megastar tag match the night prior. And I really don't know how you turn that around at this point. I mean, at this stage, I think the reality is that from a company standpoint and perhaps even from a fan standpoint, the tag match is going to be the bigger priority. And the only thing people are looking at for night 2 is Cody beating Roman for the belt. And whatever drama happens in the middle to get to that point, it's not really going to have a ton of heat. God, I can only pray to God that when Cody wins that belt from Roman, that it's not solely because of The Rock's involvement. Because that shit would be so lame. After everything that's led to this point, it's just going to set a bad precedent for the rest of Cody's title run. The fact that the only reason he ended Roman's title reign was due to Rock's help. And that's just bad times all around. That's not going to do anybody any favors. Especially not Cody. But we'll see what they have planned for next week. I'm serious though, man. They need to crank up the heat to the max now. Because we need it. After this low-key popcorn fart of a TV main event, where there was no excitement in the air, we need something. Crash TV, heavy heat angle. I don't care what they do. Hire fucking Russo for one night to book the most chaotic TV brawl segment you'll ever do. Because we need that right now. The Cody-Roman feud, it's ice cold. It really is. So, closing things out with NXT this week. This was actually very much like Retro Raw, in the sense that the show was primarily centered around one thing, the NXT title rematch between Bo Dallas and Adrian Neville. The rest of the show was kind of your standard run-of-the-mill NXT programming, meaning there was a lot of mediocre squash filler and poorly acted skits involving talking. Some people may refer to those as promos. I call them hideously recited cable access lines. Or for short, we'll just call them lifetime movie acting. And now keep in mind too, we're still in the period with NXT where the takeovers weren't part of WrestleMania weekend. So even though we're approaching WrestleMania around this time, NXT was still just kind of a weekly developmental show, not really playing much of a role in the main roster programming. Now, we did at least have a main event quality match for this week's episode, but the shows in general are still really hard to sit through a lot of the time. Still got that Vince McMahon handprint all over the formatting. And my God, the gimmicks on this show. Don't even get me started. Got a very weird sense of deja vu with the opener this week. Could have sworn we opened last program with a Mojo Rawley squash. This week it was the same deal. He wrestled the Planet Activist this week. Within a matter of seconds, after they queued up CJ Parker's music, Jason Albert on commentary pretty much let the cat out of the bag. He point blank just goes, I don't get the hype of this guy. Neither did anybody else, Jason. That's why the gimmick was death. You know, that's another thing I haven't mentioned about this program that is just utterly rotten most weeks. The commentary. God, is it atrocious. Just abominably bad. Nobody has any chemistry. Poor William Regal. Most of the time when he's out there, he's basically talking to potted plants. So this is one of those modern WWE matches where the guy they're putting over gets his ass kicked for 80% of it. Then he miraculously fires up at the end and wins with his finish from out of nowhere. It's exactly what happened here. Parker beat the shit out of Rawley for an hour. Nobody cared. People were legitimately sitting on their hands the whole time. And then Rawley sprung out of the corner and squashed Parker. Beat him with a seated splash off the ropes. Totally out of the Hulk Hogan no-sell playbook. He just said, well, time to make my comeback. And poor CJ Parker was left for dead. Just like his WWE career by and large. And just to let us know how much of a geek he was, Parker proceeded to throw a tantrum after the match and then cry about the loss. So he was doubly a geek. Wonderful. Just wonderful. Then we went to a clip where Doc Samson waved a flashlight in front of Sami Zayn's face for a couple seconds. This is apparently a test to see whether or not he still had concussion symptoms. That's protocol for testing for concussions. Just flash a light in a dude's face over and over again. Sign me up for that shit, bro. Medical officials make a pretty penny in sports professions from what I hear. I'll take a 6-figure salary to wave a light in a guy's face. Fuck yeah. That's all it takes. And from there, we came back for Xavier Woods versus Tyler Breeze. This is just amazing. Me looking at what I wrote down for this segment. This is how the feud began between these two guys back at the Arrival special. See if you remember this. Alexander Rusev showed up before their match, killed them both, and then left them for dead. So a monster heel laid them both out like total job guys. Yet somehow, I'm supposed to give a fuck now that both of them are finally facing off on TV. After a more impressive athlete showed up and disposed of them like trash. A more physically imposing talent, I should add. Can you say the word jobber with me? Tyler Breeze out there in his flesh-colored ring tights. This did not help his credibility any. I mean, I'm really trying to look for positive things to take away from this, but it's damn near impossible based on everything they set up beforehand. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. The story is, these guys suck. They're complete underneath dorks. One guy's wrestling with fucking twisties on his knee pads. The other guy can't win a match to save his life. I mean, the wrestling here was fine. Woods is a ring veteran, so there's no issue there. He's got all the basics down. But it's just the way both of these guys have been presented on television for weeks now. You just can't take any of their stuff seriously. And I'm already well aware of what's coming down the pike with Tyler Breeze in the next few months. Him going over wasn't really a shock. He hit Woods with a spin heel kick from basically out of nowhere. That tends to be how a lot of these NXT finishes go these days. Just bam, out of nowhere. Cold. Here's the finish. And then after Breeze won, he took a few selfies in the aisleway. And do I need to remind you all, his selfie stick has peacock feathers on it. Seriously, what the fuck are we doing? This shit is so bad. Just so bad, dude. How in the world people ever consider this good, captivating programming is beyond me. And then following that, we had a quick Bo Dallas promo where he basically mocked the idea of Neville proving he was better. Bo talked about how he was never pinned, never submitted for the belt. All Neville did was prove he's a better climber. But they're not in a jungle gym tonight. So Neville's going to have to show Bo and his Bo levers that NXT arrival wasn't a fluke. Tonight is pinfall submission only. No gimmicks, no furniture, no shticks. And again, to reiterate the quiet part out loud in case you need the reminder, they indeed chose to follow a ladder match with a regular singles match. Modern booking. Then we had Corey Graves versus Yoshitatsu. My notes read the following 2 words. Not even a full sentence. But it encapsulates everything you need to know about this. Tatsu's music. I strongly encourage you, whenever you have a few seconds, next time you're going to take a piss or something, go YouTube Yoshitatsu's WWE theme music. It is fucking wild. If Japanese culture had a fixation with LSD-inspired EDM pop music, Yoshitatsu's music is the benchmark. It is an incredible composition. I've listened to it in the car at stoplights, full blast. I get some weird fucking looks from people, let me tell you. So Graves eventually beat him with a Lucky 13. Nobody gave a shit. You could hear people breathing, it was so quiet. And then after Graves won, he got on the microphone and told Sami Zayn to stay down. Stay down. Just like everybody does during your matches, Corey. So what was next? Well, Charlotte and Natty had a Divas match. It was slightly better than your average run-of-the-mill WWE Divas match. I know those standards aren't incredibly high. Bret accompanied Natty to ringside for this one. They more or less billed it as a surprise. Bret looked very old and very gray. He moved like he was 1,000 years old. But he still looked chipper. So good on him. He was a far cry from the Bret we knew 30 plus years prior. but he still had that reputation with the audience. Now, before I go into any more detail about the match, I have to ask, and this is a genuine question, I'm not even trying to be a jackass here. Can somebody please explain the Summer Rae on a popsicle stick gimmick? Why was that a thing? Is it because she got called up to the main roster, but they still hadn't technically broken her away from Sasha and Charlotte? So they basically had to let everybody know she was still part of the group? It's just very odd seeing Sasha come out every week with Summer Rae's head on a popsicle stick. Now, that notwithstanding, like I said, the match was fine. I don't like Charlotte Flair. I can never overstate that enough. But, she didn't visibly fuck anything up from what I saw. They kept everything mostly grounded. Natty got cut off and worked over about midway through. Charlotte was taunting Bret on the floor at various points, which kind of made for some awkward exchanges between him and Charlotte. Because Bret wasn't really reacting to anything. He just kind of looked on with moot face. Or I guess we'd coin that RBF. Resting Bret face. But the finish is Natty picking Charlotte's ankles to try to set her up for a sharpshooter. And Sasha ran in for the blatant DQ. And then we get this awesome visual where Natty had Sasha in the sharpshooter hold. Meanwhile, Charlotte's just kind of laying there on the mat selling. Could have easily gotten up to break up the hold. But instead she's a heel, so she's like, nah, I'm just going to lay here like a dirtbag and let Sasha get her ass beat for me. That was at least good attention to detail. It is exactly something a conniving heel would do. Let the lackey take the bulk of the beating while you sell and pretend like you can't get up to help. But it all kind of worked out. Natty made her own comeback, sent the heels packing, didn't need 5,000 run-ins and a bunch of other bullshit going on to get the point across. I really don't know how this helped the Paige Charlotte program any, but maybe they're going in a different direction now. Who knows? I certainly don't remember what the fuck they were doing with the girls' division around this point. Nor did I really care. But I did care about the main event. So let's go ahead and talk about it. The rematch between Bo Dallas and Adrian Neville for the NXT Championship. The first title defense, I believe, for Neville since he won the belt at TakeOver. And, there's plenty to say about it. Honestly, if you ask me which match I prefer between this one and the TakeOver special, it's tough. The latter match is always remembered as being more of a spectacle. Plus, you had the title change, so people sort of remember the finish. This one, you don't really hear people ever talk about the TV rematch. But, I'd argue I enjoyed this a little more than the ladder match. And that's not just because I'm poo-pooing the ladder stipulation. I was actually okay with it at the time. But in terms of just being a technically sound professional wrestling match with ebb and flow, I thought they really hit on all cylinders here. It was hard hitting. Both guys had the crowd in the palm of their hands for just about everything they did. It was a very patterned WWE style match, but I really couldn't find much fault with it. There were spots that I wasn't a particular fan of. Didn't really approve of the blind moonsault Neville gave to Dallas on the floor. And that was straight out of the AEW playbook. Oh, looky me, I'm just going to blindly leap off the top rope and hope somebody's there to catch me. I fucking hate that spot. But that's honestly the only thing I could really nitpick about it. A couple little hairy spots that I wasn't big on. But they didn't get over excessive with the near falls. The crowd got more invested the longer it went. I like that these guys were actually laying into shit. Whether it was forearms or punches or kicks. Like they actually tried to make things look legit. The ref bump tease at the end was sort of out of place. I don't know why they felt that was necessary to do. Just kind of seemed like them trying to shoehorn in an angle for the sake of doing one. But I love the deal where Bo countered the red arrow by getting the knees up. And he actually protected himself here by tucking his hands under his knees to prevent injury. That was incredibly smart. And it actually factored into the finish. Because after Bo tried to stack up Neville for a pin, Neville kicked out. So Bo went to try to charge in the corner, but he got caught with a thrust kick from out of nowhere. And then Neville decided to break out something else to finish him off. Basically did one of those inverted 450 splashes. And the announcers even played it up as him pulling a new trick out of the bag. And I actually like that was part of the story. A new move. Christ almighty, imagine that. And they put it over. It was actually something that factored into the overall story. Well, I couldn't beat the guy with this flashy move. So let me try something equally as devastating. And again, it was actually the fucking finish. It wasn't, okay, I'll do my inverted 450 and then I'll pick the guy up, hit him with 6 fucking pile drivers, and then pin him with a big boot. No, they actually worked it smart. So yeah, really enjoyed this. I mean, I love Bo's work in NXT. Incredibly gifted talent. It's a damn shame he never caught wind on the main roster. And when kept under the corporate thumb, and he abstains from doing shitty lucha matches, Pac's a great talent. I've been a fan of his for a very long time. He just gets caught up in the wrong crew. Hence his AEW run for the past 4 years. That guy should have been a much bigger deal than he wound up being. But instead it's just an endless cycle where he comes in and out of the company, he appears and then disappears, he's just shuffled into the mid-card and nobody cares about him. His NXT run was great. They did all the right things with him. So I would absolutely recommend checking this out if you can find a clip of it. And like I said, I would probably say I enjoyed this a little more than the ladder match. It just had a little more of what appeals to me when it comes to main event title matches. Just 2 great athletes who know how to work and know how to generate reactions from the crowd. But they're not relying on gimmicks or furniture or unnecessary comedy to get it over. It all worked out in the end. And from here, now I actually don't remember where we go. I know they're still building up Tyson Kidd behind the scenes, getting him set for a little bit of a run here in the main event picture. Bo Dallas, I think he's still around for a bit longer before the main roster call-up. And Neville's just kind of kickstarting his title run, so I know it goes on for a little longer. I don't remember his title reign being incredibly long, but it also wasn't blinking you miss it gone. Yeah, we're still in the era of NXT where they didn't have to vacate the belt every 2 weeks because of injuries or abrupt main roster call-ups. Can't wait till we get to that period. Like I said, the show always is going to have ups and downs. We're still in a rough patch, though, where it's really hard to sit through a lot of this stuff. They are slowly edging their way toward the standard NXT model that I think a lot of people resonated with later on. And I think the main event was sort of a sample size for what we would kind of see later on once they ditched all the cartoon gimmicks and the stupid personalities. You still had a handful of those sprinkled in over the years, but it wasn't like this period where everybody basically had a terrible 90s gimmick of some sort. overall, there really wasn't much to check out this week aside from the main event. But, it is definitely one I would recommend you go out of your way to see. So with that all said, we're going to round it out for this week. And I will catch you guys on Friday for the continuation of the Retro Review Series, where we will be covering the first inaugural Clash of Champions, as well as Mid-South and World Class. So stay tuned for that. And next Monday will be the WrestleMania 11 review, as well as Retro NXT and whatever remnants of SmackDown I decide to watch. So, yeah, we're gearing up for a couple little special segments on the channel, but the big one is coming up in a couple weeks where we'll talk about WrestleMania Nights 1 and 2, or whatever we're calling it, WrestleMania XL, WrestleMania 40. We'll see. But thanks everybody for checking the show out, and I will catch you all soon. Take care. Peace out.